Greetings to our audience today. My name is Larry Pearson, Vice President of Marketing at Impetus Technologies, and I will be your host for today's session on the topic of instantly converting Teradata ETL and EDW workloads to Spark on cloud or on-prem. Let's take a minute and look at the agenda for today's session. We'll talk for a minute about the case for modernization. What is it that has launched virtually all large corporations in the Fortune 500 to have data infrastructure, data warehouse, data management modernization initiatives in place, how to get started on that journey, a solution, an automation framework which we've developed and will demonstrate today, which is helping them accelerate their journey into a modern data architecture. Included in that will be a success story on where we've done this. We've done it with a number of corporations. We'll recap some of the results from that. We'll do an actual demonstration of that platform, and then we'll close out with a live Q&A at the end, which is always one of the highlights of every one of the webinars that we do, and we do these frequently on related topics. You will have the opportunity during the webinar at any time to enter using the lower right-hand corner of your of your console to enter your questions, and as I say, we'll plan to answer those live at the end of today's session. For those that are not answered live and on the air, we will commit to provide a email follow-up, so none of those will be ignored, and encourage you please to participate in that. Let me take just a minute and tell you about Impetus Technologies. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, we've been working now in the big data analytics space for more than 12 years, dating back as an early adopter to the early days of Apache Hadoop. And the fact of the matter is that the objective in working with these large companies on their modernization initiatives is exactly what you see on this screen here. It's commonly referred to as a single source of truth, and it allows us to help and enable them for a unified, clear, and present view of their business, which is really the objective of some of what we're talking about today in these modernization efforts. We do recommend that you view the presentation in full screen mode, because there will be a demonstration later, and you'll be better able to see some of the charts and images and dashboard screens that we'll be sharing with you during that portion of the webinar. What we'd also like to do right now is open a poll question. It's another way we try to add some interactivity to these webinars, and that poll question will remain open for the next 15 minutes. I encourage you to participate in that. At that point in time, we will display the results of the poll and share that with you 15 minutes from now. And the poll, as you see it on your screen, do you think that Teradata BTEC can be converted through automation to a modern target platform? And the three options are yes, I think it's possible, no, it's not possible to do that through automation, or we're not sure, we're just getting started. And again, I look forward to sharing your results to that poll in another 15 minutes. Let me take a pause now and introduce our two subject matter experts for today. Hadi Kodakala is Director of Big Data Strategy at Impetus. He leads our Big Data Strategy consulting team, and in that role, he's responsible for helping our customers implement innovative technology solutions to leverage their big data assets. He is an expert in big data, cloud, and advanced analytics, and is working directly with a number of Fortune 500 customers, helping them advance in their journey to a modern data architecture. With him today is Barry Tuthill. Barry is our VP of Field Operations. He has close to 20 years of experience working with some of the leading solution providers in the country. While at Impetus, he's been instrumental in organizing and leading our Impetus field teams, as well as our partners in their work assisting clients with their strategic digital transformation initiatives. And I'm delighted to have both of these two subject matter experts with me today. And let us start, Hadi, by asking you to jump in and take over from here.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to be here to share with our audience information around modernizing traditional data architectures powered by popular technologies such as Teradata. Certainly, one of the top of mind items for many IT and business leaders alike. We know every business and enterprise has some analytical infrastructure humming along and providing the analytics they need. And one may wonder, should we even entertain this thought of a modern data architecture? So to examine that, certainly it's a valid question, but we feel enterprises should ask themselves a couple simple questions, which kind of help quickly resolve that. Inquiring about readiness across three key dimensions, which is basically across their business dimension, technology, and strategic dimensions. And what do I mean by that is from a business readiness standpoint, does the current state adequately address both the current and future needs of the organization's analytical needs, or are they at risk of not being able to support emerging near-term and long-term sophisticated demands from the business? Likewise, when you're talking about technology readiness, are they dealing with vintage technology today? Will the same tech support their current and anticipated future performance needs adequately? That's a good question to ask from that front. And then when it comes to strategic readiness, we're looking about the balance between the business and technology readiness aspects. Is there a clear balance between the platform strategy that is in place and the current analytical infrastructure and the tech adoption? And likewise, is there day-to-day operations at any risk from a disruption? So those are some of the key questions across those three dimensions. Additionally, there is also how critical is a single source of truth for their information needs to be successful in meeting the emerging demands, and is it available to them today? So if, as we examine those questions, and if no is a very answer that comes across a lot of these questions, if then, and well, there is importance of single source of truth, which may be elusive today, it's definitely a case for a modernization. The call for a modern architecture is very, very imminent, and they should look at embarking on that journey of transformation that will enable and give them access to a unified single source of truth. In fact, in the industry, Gartner, experts from Gartner's have quoted that more than 80% of enterprises have launched modernization initiatives, like you said earlier as well. And all these initiatives have a single goal in mind, that is to create a data-driven enterprise of the future based on a single source of truth. And that's the imperative need, and that's the drive for the modern data architecture. So now, what comprises of this modern data architecture? What are the key features, right? There will be, of course, quite a few on a wish list, but there are some very key features that come. One is the flexibility, first and foremost. What do I mean there is accommodating new forms of use cases, accommodating the ever-changing demands of business seamlessly. Secondly, have an elasticity in the architecture that can adapt to the data processing requirements from the technology end of it to cater to these demands across compute, storage, functionality, and the various forms of data. Likewise, cost efficiency. That's one of the biggest drivers with any technology purchase and with any of these exercises of the modern data architecture. As we build out these architectures, they have to be cost effective. Cost avoidance is a powerful driver for this. Then we come to versatility of the data architecture, which kind of touches upon the flexibility aspect, the ability to work with all forms of data, ability to quickly provide different types of capabilities fairly easily. And then lastly, it has to be secure. The data architecture has to support security in such a fashion that security is pervasive at a granular level. And it should be the hallmark of any modern data architecture today, given the conditions and environment of how the importance of data and how the security of data is so important for enterprises. Now, there are, of course, other features as well. I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list, like efficiency, support for advanced analytics, independence from vendors, but they also will eventually impact the modern data architecture. Now, how does all this translate to the journey of transforming Teradata to modern architecture? That's definitely a good question, right? As we know, all Teradata is one of the central technologies in the enterprises adopted across industries to meet the analytical needs. Teradata is synonymous to EDWs in most organizations wherever it's employed. Now, EDW transformation is certainly one of the first tactical steps to scale up to an identified modern data architecture. And in the subsequent slides, we'll talk more about what are the ways to get there, some key action items, potential risks that you will encounter as you embark on those transformation journeys, and of course, our recommendations to follow up with, and how to ascertain that these transformation initiatives become success story for your organization. So quickly talking about what are the key action items as you embark on this transformation journey, right? The number one action item is, of course, selection of the platform components. There is a constant evolution in the industry. Multiple options are available in the form of products, solutions, both in the cloud, on-premise installations. It is imperative to select the right mix or the right balance, right, to match the best performance guarantees of Teradata, while also balancing the cost effectiveness that would be desired in this particular exercise. So that's a very key action item. Then the next important aspect that comes to bear is the readiness for addressing cultural requirements. It's a very, very critical action item because both from a user community perspective within the organization to get the support from them, and likewise from the various components of the organization, the cultural practices in place. As organizations put teams together to shoulder these responsibilities, and likewise also balancing the keeping the lights on for a disruption-free transition. So those there has to be care taken so that cultural practices do not end up becoming hidden hindrances for success. So that's another key activity to focus on. Lastly, minimize risks. Risk management, that's critically important. It's not the last but not the least. A constant focus on risk management is important. Identifying potential risks ahead of time and mitigating or eliminating them. Because as you engage in these activities, new risks might emerge, which may or may not have been factored out. So there is a constant risk management activity that has to be put in place. Certainly, this is also not an exhaustive list of key action items. There are as the organizations start into delving into the details of these activities, there is a realization as to how daunting this task can get. As organizations get going on the key action items, they will also come across some initial stumbling blocks to resolve. Typical stumbling blocks teams encounter are in the form of simple questions like, where do we start? And then who do you actually bring in for this transformation? How will we accomplish this? Should it be in-house? Should there be some external expertise that has to be brought in? Are there automation options to further minimize risk, to maybe accelerate the overall transformation? Can we try that? Is that a good option? So questions like that. As these stumbling blocks could raise even more open questions, like when it comes to the tactical aspects of data rationalization when you're going to a new environment, performance guarantees, SLAs matching, especially when you're talking about a Cadillac system like Teradata, which has been serving the enterprise with a certain expectation. And then the other functional aspects of, will this transformation be well received? Will there be user adoption? So these are all good and meaningful questions that come to light, but they will also bring certain potential risks that we have observed consistently as organizations take this journey of transformation. So what are these potential sources of risk? One is, of course, teams responsible to deliver this can feel overwhelmed dealing with a confusing spectrum of choices. I call it a paralysis of choice because there are so many options, so many products, new and old, new platform-based solutions that really kind of make it finding the right balance challenging. And as it goes on, as you start delving into those selection aspects, that becomes the overwhelming aspect is a risk. And then you stumble upon predicted complexities, which are part of the general transformation process of the nodes that you know within the Teradata environment. And at times, unpredictable nuances start popping up, given the target choices that have been selected, because everywhere there are certain gaps in information which may or may not give you the predictable outcome, which during selection might have seemed simple, but when you actually get into the tactical implementation, it might be a challenge. Now this happens to the best of us, and we have seen this consistently as we have helped customers in their journey, and organizations, every time they embark on transformation, it is certainly an important factor. Moving on, time. Time is not your friend at times either. Time doesn't wait. And in certain cases, time could become a factor that causes a serious risk given the executive sponsorship, given the timelines that are agreed upon within organizations, and if the planning has not taken into certain elements into consideration based on the activities I was talking about. So those time becomes a factor as well. Lastly, having access to the right expertise at the right time. That's equally important. That's a risk that you have to contend with as you're going into a new technologies, choices for a modern architecture of this transformation journey. And that could jeopardize outcomes significantly as well, because it's not always apparent that in-house capabilities can deliver. So that definitely brings a good amount of risks to focus. And all in all, these risks, and there will be other risks as well that can pop up, but these are pretty typical that we have observed. And all in all, these potential risks expose the organization's propensity to strategy failures in this journey, or leading to unplanned serious disruptions that may or may not be explained, but easily explained, and may trigger into subsequent fallouts at many levels within the organization, which may be on the predictive line or unpredicted. So that's the seriousness of this transformation journey risks that you have to encounter as you go forward. So quickly summing up, we talked about the key action items necessary for transforming to a modern data architecture for this Teradata journey, which is also exposing some of the risks that are there. And now we'll talk about, it's not all doom and gloom as I'm talking about the risks, but we'll talk about how we can definitely solve that. We have recommendations for that. So back to you, Larry. I would
How do you
like
thank
to
you?
send it back for
Certainly, thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for that. It's time to close our poll and share the poll results. You should see those coming up on your screen here momentarily. There you go. So yes, a little over 1/3 of our audience said it is possible through automation. 10% said, no, I don't think it's possible. And almost half of the audience says, I'm not sure, and that probably explains why you're here with us today. And hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you'll have an answer to that. So thank you all for responding to our poll. What I would like to do now is hand the speaking over to Barry Tuthill for the next portion of our agenda. Barry, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Larry. And hello, everyone. Appreciate the time you're spending with us on a Friday afternoon here. As Larry had mentioned before, I handle field operations here at Impetus, and one of the nice things about my job is I get to go out and meet with customers all around the country to talk about data warehouse modernization. And it really is a dilemma that we see out there in the marketplace. You know, when you think about it, we're talking about taking mission-critical business applications that have been running in their businesses for the past 15 to 20 years, and we're talking about moving them over to a new platform. You know, this is not a trivial exercise, and certainly a lot of strategy has to be put in place to do it the right way. One of the interesting things that I hear from customers is kind of the different approaches organizations are taking when they look at modernization. You know, one is on the left-hand side, migrating as is. So taking all the stuff that you've built over the past 15 or 20 years and just migrating it over to everything over to the new platform. That's a big effort, big brute force effort. We have to manually re-engineer stuff, but we're just going to take everything we had and put it over to this new platform. And you know, certainly there's advantages of that. I mean, there's definitely some advantages from a quantity and speed perspective, but there's also some significant disadvantages of that approach because of the prevalence of these platforms over the past 15, 20 years, the way they've been developed. You know, what you'd find if you do an analysis of these systems is there's a whole lot of redundancy. So if you migrate as is, you're migrating redundancy. Also, what you'd find is, you know, some of these platforms are very forgiving. So, you know, from the ground up, you'll notice that certain applications haven't been architected very well. So if you migrate as is, you're migrating something potentially that wasn't built the right way in the first place over to a new platform. Right? So definitely need to think about those things as you look at migrating as is. Then you've got the whole other end of the spectrum on the right, where you've got total re-engineering. So I'm going to take everything that I've built over the last 15, 20 years, and I'm going to throw it in the trash, and I'm going to start from scratch. Certainly, I understand that approach from a quality perspective because these platforms need to be built and things need to be designed in a certain way to take advantage of these modern platforms. But you know, is that really feasible from a time, risk, and cost and effort perspective? Is that really the best approach to take? Oftentimes not. You know, when customers talk about total re-engineering, I will oftentimes ask them, well, are you really re-engineering business processes? Are you taking these business processes that you've been building over the past 20 years and are you radically changing them? Oftentimes the answer is no. So total re-engineering isn't necessarily the best approach to take either. And what customers really need to realize is there's a balance between both of those approaches. Right? And we really need to figure out what that balance is. I'm going to share with you some data points that Impetus has seen with working with our customers over the past 10 years. And we call it a 60-20-20 rule. So if you look at your environment today as it stands, 60% of that environment can be migrated as is. So you move it over, you take your BTECs and your SQLs and you move them over, you turn them into Spark jobs, and they can run in this new target platform. The other 20% can be migrated as is, but also require some sort of re-engineering, some sort of performance tuning or optimization to really make them run efficiently in that new target environment. Right? And then the other 20% really fall into this category of total re-engineering because, hey, these things weren't architected the right way in the first place. You know, let's really start from scratch with this. So that's the approach that Impetus takes, you know, this 60-20-20 rule, and really providing a balance of both of these migrate as is approaches as well as re-engineering and providing that flexibility for our customers to do that. So how can we help? We can help you take your Teradata data warehouse and all the Informatica jobs and or ab initio jobs or SaaS jobs, as well as any other data warehouse that you might have. And we can help you move those workloads and those applications over to this new modern platform. And we can do it very fast, and we call it automagically, because what we're driving in our process, in our methodology, is a significant amount of automation. So we call it, we go through this four-step process. Oftentimes we call it a four-click paradigm. And it's all about driving automation in these kind of four key areas. The first area is assessment. So as you heard earlier and probably understand, a lot of customers don't know where to start, right? They don't know what is within this data warehouse. What types of applications do I have running? How much capacity are these applications running? What are the complexity of these applications? How much redundancy do I have in these platforms? Customers oftentimes don't have visibility into this. And that's the key first step for any successful modernization initiative. We need to go in, we need to assess the environment and understand all those complexities. We need to understand that redundancy. We need to understand what's happening within this environment. And through our tool, we have an automated way to do that, and I'll share with you in the demo as we get to that. The next part is transform. So you need to take all this business logic that you've been building for many, many years, and it needs to be transformed into a new language that can run in your target environment. In the case for today, we're talking about a lot about Spark, and we talked to a lot of customers and their interest in moving to Spark. So with Impetus's approach, we've actually figured out a way to automate that transformation of your legacy business logic to the new Spark business logic. And we've got a transformation engine that we've tuned and built over the last 5 or 6 years to drive extreme acceleration in this transformation process. The next step is validate. Validate enables you to ensure that at every step of the way as part of this transformation process, that as you're moving data from one system to another, tables, views, schemas, that they're matching, that we know that from a source perspective and as we move it over to the target, that they match. So through this validation process, we're ensuring, and doing this in an automated way, ensuring things are moving effectively. And the final step is execute. What Impetus's engine and solution provides is essentially an executable file ready to be run in your new target platform, whatever that might be. AWS, Azure, Cloudera, S3, the flexibility to be able to take that transformed code and run it in the target environment, of course, of your choice. So from a value perspective, what our customers see is significant acceleration in their journey to a modern platform. We've heard numerous customer stories of, just trying to get a single application from their data warehouse environment, taking years to migrate because it's, it could be 10,000, 20,000 queries. Single application taking over a year to migrate, costing millions and millions of dollars. Impetus's automated approach and what we've seen with our customers is we've been able to reduce that time by at least 50%. So what would have taken you over a year will take you 6 months with Impetus's automated approach. And it's not just automation and acceleration, right? It's really driving all those other key value areas that Tari was talking about earlier. How do we reduce risk? Well, that's ensuring that we're validating things as we're moving things over. Other areas of risk. How do we make sure that what we're moving over is performant and that end users are going to get the same results that they've been getting for the last 15 years, right? Ensuring that performance, right? And reducing your costs at the same time. At the core of Impetus's solution and our approach is a transformation engine. This is something, again, that we've been building out and tuning with customers over the past 5 years. It has the ability to take your legacy code and understand the syntax of that code and produce the corresponding output on the right-hand side of the screen. So they're taking SQL jobs, turning them into Spark jobs or Hive jobs or PL SQL to Spark, whatever it might be. But the idea here is it's not just a one-to-one translation, if you will. It truly is a transformation because we've built intelligence in this engine to figure out not only how do we transform this code, but how do we transform it in a way that's optimized for the target environment. So there's intelligence built into this engine. Now with Teradata, I know this is a topic for today, we get right around 80% automated conversion right out of the gate. So if you had 10,000 queries, 8,000 of those will run through our engine, and they're in Spark, they're ready to be run in that target environment. But the key thing to also understand is this is a learning engine. So what we don't automate, we actually will look at, and we'll say, these are what that 20% that we missed is actually represents unique patterns to the enterprise that we're talking to. And in certain cases, there'll be so many of those patterns where we'll say, hey, listen, we should probably add that pattern to our engine. So we get higher degrees of automation as we move forward with different phases of a project with a customer. Jumping into a quick case study. This is a case study of a large telco. I'm sure many of you guys would know, but we couldn't share the name, unfortunately. What were their challenges? Well, data volumes, and this is just a common challenge with any customer that we're talking to. Data volumes are growing at an exponential rate. And with that, they're experiencing increasing costs. I mean, if you're on this call talking about data warehouse modernization, then you're in the data warehousing world, and you understand that every year or a couple of years, you get that dreaded refresh bill where you need to add additional nodes to your data warehouse environment. And it's not to get any sort of really net new capability, right? Really all you're getting is enough capacity to keep up with the data volumes, right? So they were also experiencing those increasing costs as their data volumes were growing. And then, from a complexity perspective, they've realized that, over the many years that they've developing this platform, that things have kind of gotten a little out of control. And, the environment was become very complex, and they needed to move to something a little bit more flexible and cost effective. So what were we able to do through our solution? We took 20,000 of their queries in Teradata and automatically moved them over to Spark to run in there. In this case, it was an on-premise data lake. Through our automated solution, we were able to migrate all of their historical and incremental data. And more importantly, we were able to take those queries and ensure that they were running in a high-performant manner, that there was going to be no experience from their end users that would make this migration look unsuccessful. From an end user perspective, they didn't even realize that the application and the queries had moved over. Also, from a value perspective, they were able to reduce their dependency on Teradata. We were able to get them to avoid that refresh bill, so that cost avoidance is certainly a key driver there. We were able to move all of their ETL logic over to the data lake. Now, I can tell you, if you're running Teradata or any other data warehouse, even in a highly optimized environment, 50 to 60% of your capacity in that environment are all ETL and data preparation type jobs. Those are very easy to start moving over to a more cost-effective data lake or cloud solution. Right? We were able to start by moving this stuff over to the data lake. We were able to handle the larger data volumes. And then, of course, the other value points of the data lake is the ability to do different types of analytics that they weren't able to do before. Teradata often doesn't have the flexibility to deal with unstructured data. So it's very difficult for data scientists to kind of bring in the different types of, data that they wanted to run analytics. And by migrating this stuff over, we provided them that flexible platform. Now I'm going to jump over to a quick demo of the product. Let me just share my screen here.
Barry, while you're doing that, let me jump in and remind our audience to send their questions in. Following the demo, we'll move to the Q&A portion, and we'd love to be able to respond to your interest there. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. So I hope you see my screen now. This is Impetus Workload Transformation. This is the solution that I've been describing to you. It's a web-based tool. It can be deployed in the cloud or in your environment. And I am logged in as an administrator of this tool. And as I log in, it takes me to my kind of dashboard, and it just tells me what's going on in my world, what types of assessments I have running, different pipelines that I've executed, transformation pipelines that I've executed. But what I'm going to do is walk you through that 4-click process that I talked about in the slides. So the first step in any engagement with our customers is assessment. And we can do an assessment simply by getting access to log files from your Teradata environment. So I'm going to walk you through an assessment that we've already built in the tool. This is a Teradata assessment where we uploaded the log files. And in an automated way, we create this dashboard view of here's what's going on in the Teradata environment. Right? As we can see here, there's a total of 15,000, just over 15,000 queries. If I look down a little bit more, you can see only 5,500 of those are actually unique queries. Right? So right out of the gate, I'm identifying redundancy in my Teradata environment. Okay? If I look over here at the different types of queries, and all of this stuff is drillable, this information is drillable, I can drill into this query types, and I can see the different, out of the 5,500 queries, kind of where they fall across these different categories of inserts, updates, deletes. And I can actually look at the queries. But what's really important here is complexity on the right-hand side. Right? This is critical. And as I mentioned before, what we try to identify is that 60-20-20 rule, right? What are the things that can be easily migrated over versus the things that can be migrated but will need to be tuned, a little bit optimized for the target environment, versus the stuff that, hey, let's not even run it through our engine. Let's build this stuff from scratch. Here's where we do that, right? We've got our own algorithm that we run against these queries to identify the complexity of the queries. And we can work with the customers to figure out, okay, which ones should we migrate through the system? Just figure out what falls into that 60-20-20 rule so we can properly plan out, a migration strategy. Oh, sorry. If I go down a little bit further, I'm just showing you some very high-level specific things in this demo. Feel free to reach out to the team after if you want to get into any sort of nitty-gritty details about what I'm showing you here. What's also interesting for our customers is to start looking at it from this perspective. What are the most resource-consuming applications? So as we can see, we've got a number of different applications in this environment. I can see the execution time, CPU, and I/O time. And here's where I identify things like, what are the ETL jobs, which are very much low-hanging fruit in the Teradata environment to move over, versus what are consumption jobs where I might want to keep that stuff running in Teradata for a little while and focus on more of the data preparation work, because we know oftentimes those don't have as stringent SLAs. But through this view, what we can do is really figure out what is the low-hanging fruit. Where do we start with a customer? If I saw something like this view, we would recommend to a customer this BTEC application that's taking up 15% execution time, 31% CPU, 32% I/O. Hey, this is a great candidate to migrate over. Okay. Going back to the highlights tab, as I mentioned, all of this stuff is drillable. The preferred engine that we're moving to based on our analysis is Spark. I can go to this recommendations screen, and it says out of that 5,500 roughly queries, unique queries, 5,128 are recommended for migration. So these are recommended to be run through our engine, and are good candidates for auto conversion. Okay. So that's the first step. That is assessment. Again, that's where we want to help our customers identify how do we move a transformation program forward. Once I know what I want to move, it's as simple as creating a transformation pipeline. So I'm going to this new view, this pipeline view. And as you can see, I've created a number of pipelines in my environment. I'm going to go to this Teradata Spark pipeline. And if I drill into that pipeline, you can see here that it goes through 5 different stages. It goes from the bottom up. So the first step is migration. Then you've got data validation, got a translation step, and then an execution step. Very similar to that, those steps that we talked through in the slides. To build a pipeline like this is, it's a simple drag and drop environment. I'm sure by looking at this screen, you can kind of understand how you create something like this. It's just have this type of view and more of an editor type of view. And it's as simple as dragging and dropping these different operations. As we mentioned, migration, translation, validation, execution. You drop those into the environment. You connect the dots behind the scenes of each one of these operators. There are also there are different configuration options, especially for things like validation. You can configure validation the way you want it. And this is a pipeline that has been executed, and you can see the check marks across each one of these steps that's indicating that each one of those steps has happened successfully. I'm going to go to this output part, and we can actually see what's going on here. So let me go to the migration step. We can see we've moved these 7 tables over successfully, right? We've moved the data, the schema, and views have been migrated to Hadoop successfully, right? So we know that happened. Then let's go to the data validation step, right? It says that, 9 have matched, the status has been completed, and we applied, these different types of validation functions on the source and target sources, okay? And then what I want to focus on here is this translation step, right? So this is that engine that I brought up in the slides, where we have the ability to automatically transform your legacy code to Spark code. And if I go down here, you can actually see some of these transformations happen. Here's a simple select statement, the original query from Teradata here, right? And the select query that's ready to be run in the Hadoop environment. Here's an insert statement, right? Ready to be run. Let me try to find something a little bit more interesting here. Oh, as you can see, all these different queries have been transformed. Now, the nice thing about our approach and the way this tool works is you're not set with what the engine has been created. So if I was a developer and didn't like the way the tool had transformed the code, I could simply click on that little pencil on the bottom right-hand side, and I can go in and edit this code directly. So when we talk about the other 20% and other 20%, things that need to be re-engineered for performance and optimization purposes, or maybe things that need to be just built from the ground up, and we actually give you a UI to be able to do those types of things. So that's the ability to transform the code. Okay, let me go back to the output here, and the final step here is simply execute, right? And execute is the final step where we package up the files and execute it against the target environment. So that's the step and process that we go through. So you compare that type of process versus kind of a pure brute force manual process. I hope you can appreciate the type of acceleration you would get leveraging this approach. And I think that is it for me from a demonstration perspective. Again, I'm happy to, if you have any questions, please reach out to the team and we can, get deeper into the product if you'd like. But Larry, at this point, I'm done and I'm passing it back over to you.
Great, Barry. Thank you very much for that very clear demonstration of the four-step process that we use. And again, the invitation is out. You'll see on your screen shortly a inquiry at impetus.com. The invitation is out to where if you'd like to see a more detailed, maybe even using a handful of the queries that you may be working with, or even go right to a complete pilot or POC, you can reach us, inquiry at impetus.com, and we'll follow up and schedule that with you. This is the time in the webinar where we do treat the questions that you've put in. In addition, there's an opportunity, which you'll see here shortly, to give us user experience feedback. So we'd love for you to score your experience, give us some feedback on what you thought of the delivery on today's webinar. And now we will turn and take a look at some of the questions that have come in. You just bounce over there. One of the first questions that came in was directed toward Hadi. And the question is, when you say Teradata ETL, would that include ab initio graphs? There's a question here, Hadi, about the ETL migration effort.
Thanks, Larry. Good question. Whoever asked that, thank you. So yeah, certainly, ab initio, as we have done these transformations for customers, we have realized just the EDW workloads are not in its entirety isolated. They always go hand in hand with some supporting ETL infrastructure, and in which case ab initio is a popular choice, and we support those transformation of ab initio graphs in a very similar fashion that Barry showed you, and it is also supported by the accelerator.
Excellent. Thank you, Hadi. The next question here, Barry, maybe you'd like to handle this. It says there was a mention early on about migrating SAS also. We've addressed the ab initio question. Informatica is another ETL tool that we are working with as well to be able to do a similar automated migration of those scripts. And there was a mention also about SAS. Could you expand on our capability there for the SAS scripts?
Absolutely. Yeah, so great question. Yeah, SAS is interesting because we see very similar patterns with SAS as we do with other with the enterprise data warehouses. If you look at the types of jobs that SaaS users are running, they're not just using SaaS to build their models. They're actually doing a lot of, SQL and procedural type stuff, really data prep and ETL-centric type processes. Those processes are very capacity heavy to a SaaS environment. So, we have customers that are actively looking to move those processes over to Spark, not only for the cost benefits, because just like these other legacy platforms, SaaS is up there with, some of the most expensive stuff. So there's that huge cost benefit of moving these ETL data prep jobs over to the big data environment to get that cost benefit. But more importantly, the performance improvements. So we've seen customers, that had these SaaS models that took 8 minutes to run in their straight SaaS environment, or if it's running on the EDW, a long time. When they moved over to Spark and ran those on the data lake, they were able to push that processing down to seconds, right? So there's extreme performance gains that you can do by moving to Spark.
Thank you, Barry. We've actually.
I would just say, in our like I said, our tool our tool handles that in a similar way as I approached the Teradata, demo. Right? We do a similar auto transformation process with SaaS as well.
Excellent, Barry. We've got some other questions about support for different source environments. We've talked about Teradata, obviously. We've talked about Ab Initio. We've talked about SaaS. Other than these tools, are there other EDW or ETL platforms that we offer automated transformation on? And I would suggest that you also include in that some of the appliance source environments that I know we've been working on. So if you take a minute and talk about those.
Sure. So I'll take this. So the engine itself is very, very flexible, right? In the slides I talked about, this transformation engine that learns, and it's all based on the coding patterns of the legacy environment, and the engine can be tuned. And so we've done all sorts of different types of environments. Everything from all the enterprise data warehouses that you've all heard of. So we've worked with Vertica, we've worked with Exadata, Netezza, Teradata, etc. We've done just your traditional legacy databases, everything from SQL Server, Oracle. We've done Greenplum. We have, look at all the ETL type tools. Tools like Informatica, DataStage. We talked about Ab Initio. Those are the common tools you hear about there. And then, of course, we've got SaaS. So I think that are the predominant solutions that we are seeing in our customer base, that with the desire to move over to Spark and either run it on their on-premise data lake or in a cloud type environment.
Terrific. Hadi, we've got a question here about the telco example that we use. It says, where the Teradata target database is migrated to Spark along with the ETL jobs.
Good question, Larry. So for the telco example, the data was migrated into Hadoop essentially. So it was on Hive tables, and Spark was the processing engine for that from a transformation perspective.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where it was migrated to, all the tables.
Okay. The next question that I have here, or go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, just to quickly add up on that answer, from a destination perspective, the tool supports capabilities for even traditional cloud storage options by using transient compute or in the cloud Spark and things of that nature. And beyond Spark as well, we could support different storage engines, even from a storage perspective, storage destinations like S3 or going into an ADLS store, depending on the destination. So there is definitely versatility in the support. For the particular case, use case I was mentioning, I was just keeping it limited to that, was traditionally it was a Hortonworks Hadoop as the database for those tables that were migrated.
Okay, great. Hadi, we've got a series, a grouping of questions here that relate to our experience in working with these projects, and I'll just read all three of them off, and you can kind of group them into a sharing from your experience of that. First one says, building the strategy for Teradata migration and how this tool can help me achieve that. We talked a lot about that during assessment, but someone has asked that as a question here. Which part of the transformation is the most difficult in this journey? And what are a few of the most common challenges or impediments when it comes to the code translation? So if you maybe kind of try to address that family of concerns, that'd be great.
Certainly, Larry. All great questions. These are typical questions all our customers are also concerned about as they engage into these transformations. From a strategizing perspective, I think Larry talked about how we approach it. So the assessment is the first step, a very critical step that gives us the complete readout of how the transformation should look like for success. And as we do the assessments, we are able to chart out the roadmap very quickly. And it's a very short exercise. It's not like a time-consuming exercise from our end. We can get that done within 2 to 3 weeks and quickly provide value and give a good roadmap. So that's how we usually address the strategy part. Now, coming to the most difficult parts of the journey, and of course, the impediments. Impediments come in different shapes. From a technology standpoint, in the code, definitely it could depend on the nuances of the patterns that may or may not be available in our engine, where we have to then train the engine for that. So it takes a little bit of a time, depending on the degree of customization, if any. That is one aspect of it. However, on the difficult parts of journey, a lot of times it is optimization. Customers are used to a certain, I would say, unique aspects of Teradata, for example. They're used to the indexing strategies in play, which may be suitable for that environment. But when you move to a new environment, you have to provide the right optimization match for it so that expectations are met and it is disruption-free from a downstream consumption standpoint as you get into the transformation. So when customers engage in that manually, it definitely is always an exercise which comes in that 20% that Barry was talking about. There is a lot of strategies that have to be brought in. We do have those optimization strategies for most of these competing aspects and the tough aspects that can be challenging otherwise. However, they do exist, and we basically mitigate it in different ways. We have explicit strategies for each of those elements by using in-memory tables in Spark. We could address those indexing issues. Likewise, handling set tables and multi-set tables in the Teradata environment and differently in the big data environment or the target environment of choice. So that's how I would quickly answer those questions. Back to you, Larry.
Hadi, thank you very much. We are out of time. You'll see on your screen right now the opportunity to answer a final poll question. Would you be interested in a deep dive of the solution as shown in the webinar? We'd be happy to customize and put that together for you. Please rate your webinar experience with from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. And in addition, you'll see on that same screen the ability to give us feedback or comments, which would allow us to improve the delivery of our future webinars. There were several offers to provide you with other information. If you see on your screen now, it says visit us at www.impetus.com/transform if you want more information off of our website. In addition, if you'd like us to follow up directly with you, you can do that through inquiry@impetus.com. We had several other questions that came in after we were up on our time here, and we'll be sure to get those out. Questions like what are the inputs to the automation, DBQL tables, and others. Some very specific questions about the Hortonworks HDP Hadoop clusters, typically using TES or some related capabilities instead of Spark. Will your process work on those as well? And any other questions that do come in, we'll be sure to get the answers to those out on email. Thank you again for your attention today. Do give us your feedback through the feedback survey on your screen. And if we can help further, there's information here at our website, or reach us inquiry@impetus.com. And thank you very much for participating today. This concludes our webinar.